And good morning. We are live on YouTube and Nick's Twitter account. We figured out something to do, a new feature from StreamYard. So thanks, StreamYard. So we're streaming to Nick's Twitter account as well as my YouTube. And then we'll go to Atlanta Falcons fans on Facebook and Scott Kennedy Sports on Facebook. And then we'll get started here. I know there's a lot of people in here ready to talk. It's already hopping this morning. It's been a fast and furious week for sure, considering that the free agency period really officially opens today. Welcome in, everybody. This is Coast to Coast Football. My name is Scott Kennedy. I go by Scout Kennedy, just kind of a play on words from a place I happen to work for about 15 years. I'm in Atlanta, over on this side over here. This is Nick Kendell. He is in Seattle. So we are coast to coast, kind of stretched across the United States, northwest to southeast. Appreciate everybody coming in here early this morning. Lots of chats already, so we'll say hello to some folks. But first, I want to say hello to Nick. Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. Been getting the big L's on the wilderness backpacking lotteries. Got the denied from Mount Rainier yesterday, and got the denied from Mount Whitney today. And I'm sure I'm going to get a denied from Enchantments on Friday. But hey, there's plenty of stuff that I can do out there. A lot of wilderness to explore and enjoy. So that's okay.
Well, it'll happen. You're young.
Yeah.
You're young, So the problem is, when you get to be too old, you don't want to hike those things anymore. But I'll give you a hint. I got 20 years on you. I still want to hike them. So you got time. You got time to keep being disappointed by the outdoors lottery. Some of the things we want to get into today. We'll touch on some of the free agency. We're going to touch on some of the big spenders. The Denver Broncos, the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears. I want to hit on the Colts a little bit and what they haven't been doing and what that might mean. Some of the top players that are still out there. And we'll talk about some of the players that have signed, how we think the deals are and how the fit is, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, we will probably talk a little bit about how this impacts each team at the top of the NFL draft. If you've addressed this position, are you still looking in this direction? And those type of things as well. First, I want to say hello to some folks in the chat. Don't make them wait a little bit, especially Michael Ranquillo, who comes in nice and early for us. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on Coast to Coast Football. Good morning, Michael. We're glad you can make it. And Michael says, and we can just hit on this one early, Nick. He says, congratulations to the Atlanta Falcons on re-signing Caleb McGarry. Now, I believe last week I said I wouldn't be surprised if he had a contract and was signed before the free agency period opened. Just when they didn't tag him, it was so quiet. It just makes so much sense. They've got plenty of money. He was so good for the Falcons last year. They invested a first round pick in him and just started to see the returns on him. You don't want that to go somewhere else. And you might be able to have his contract reduced a little bit compared to, say, his PFF ranking, which put him in the top 5 of all NFL tackles, because he's not necessarily a fit for other teams. That's all good news for the Falcons. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be great news for the Falcons when he was announced that he was re-signing for 3 years and about $35 million, 34.5. That's about 33% less than I was expecting, Nick. At 11 a year, I thought my opening salvo for a guy who doesn't have a huge track record, who hasn't been consistently good like Chris Lindstrom, I said 3 years, $45 million with 30 guaranteed was where I thought it would shake out. Came out with 3 years for $30 million. There's probably 2 of those guaranteed, so it'll probably come out in the 22 to 23 guaranteed range. What was your reaction to that contract?
The questions about him and the buyer beware and the type of offense he was in certainly made him tough. And we have questions about him that were not answered and made the market for him a little bit colder and softer than we could have expected. He had about 8 to 9 classic like pass drop back protections a game last season, kind of a pretty exotic offense. Let's call it what it is compared to what a lot of teams are running out there. The Falcons and the Ravens probably the most diverted from nearly everybody else, and maybe a little bit of Eagles too. Mm-hmm. But that meant that you weren't getting those true drop back pass sets. The classic ones that you see a team like Tom Brady 40 times a game if he's your quarterback. So his market was a little bit softer. 3 years were more of a classic offense and struggled. So the market was soft, I guess. That's the only thing I can come with it. I mean, he's still young. He seemed an ascending talent. Teams right now, I mean, maybe I'm just a little biased because I'm too close to the Broncos, but I think teams are leaning more into the run game again right now in today's NFL, given how light linebackers are, how few linebackers are playing, the two high safety shells. I mean, it's the cyclical nature of the game, but I feel like we're having a renaissance with the run game, and then McGarry fits that. So I'm pretty shocked to get him on the deal that they got him on.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of, I don't know. It almost feels a little bit like a little payback from McGarry. Thanks for sticking with me. They could have tried to replace him last year. I don't know. That seems a little odd, but there seems to be a little, I want to be here. I like what I've got going here. Discount. It fits good. I'm here. My buddy Chris Lindstrom, the best guard in football. I'm going to get to play next to him. He got paid, but watching the Falcons last year, Arthur Smith, with his lack of quarterback options last year, at some point in every game, just basically said, "F it, I'm going to run it down their damn throats," and they did. They could, and that's a powerful weapon that hopefully that you don't want to lose. And being able to re-sign or get an extension for Lindstrom, you weren't going to lose him this year anyway. And then to keep McGarry, to keep those two on the right side is pretty good. Is pretty good for the Falcons. Roderick Cook says, "Afternoon all, glad to be here again. Suddenly being a Falcons fan isn't a burden." Yeah, we can lead off with them a little bit after we get into the chat a little bit more. Just, I think the Falcons have had one of the best early parts of the week, period. And one of the reasons is because they have suffered greatly to get to those spots. When we talk about the big winners so far this week, it's probably the Bears and the Falcons and maybe the Broncos. And those were really bad teams that had a lot of money available because they didn't have a lot of their own guys that they wanted to pay. The difference with the Falcons has been is they were bad and broke. Well, the new regime has come in and cleared that out, and now they're able to bring in some talent. So Jeremy Sean comes in, AFC West guy, says, "Good morning, fellas. Josh McDaniels has returned to his roster implosion playbook. It's nice to be on the other side of it." A Broncos fan who watched Josh McDaniels do that. Now, the Broncos or the Raiders essentially traded Jacoby Myers for Darren Waller, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and they also turned down a second-round pick, allegedly, for Darren Waller during the trade deadline last year, and now are getting a third-round pick for him. So lesser value, turning down for more value at one point for lesser value now. There's also a whole weird situation between Josh McDaniels leaking Darren Waller's wedding plans or something involving Darren Waller's wedding and that he wasn't invited to the wedding. I don't know. There's some weird crap going on, and there's always some weird crap going on with Josh McDaniels. So I don't know.
Two guys like that just seem to be failing up. One in the college ranks and one in the pro ranks, who are just asses of large magnitude. It's Steve Sarkisian and Josh McDaniels. Those are the two guys that I just keep watching and going, what on earth are people thinking? I just, okay, good luck, Raiders. Maybe it'll turn around, but it just seems like, again, those guys just keep failing up. I got nothing against the Raiders, and I got nothing against Texas, but I don't particularly like those two human beings. Greeny Green coming in. He says, "Yerp." Well, yawp. What was that? Dead Poet Society. Let's give a big prodigious yawp. So, or a hey yo to the legendary, may you rest in peace, Scott Hall. So Roderick, I said hey to Roderick, and he says, "Very kind of you, Scott. Hope your dad as well." Yeah, my dad had gallbladder surgery yesterday, and that turns out that was an outpatient thing. He's a little beat up after having to get up and be down there at 5:30 a.m. and getting cut on, but doing well. He was home early. Surgery was done before Nick and I even went on the air yesterday, and was home resting, and I think he ended up watching some Champions League. Kevin F coming in and says, "Whew, what a couple of days." Kevin, you can be a fan of a lot of teams and feel that way for sure. Keith Robbins coming in on Facebook. He says, "Good morning." Good morning, Keith. Appreciate you being here. Joe Cannon says, "Great morning, fellas. Let's talk football." So much to talk about, Joe. We got the full hour and change today to go. We're not up against any deadlines on Wednesdays. This is going to be the longer show. Kevin says, "Good morning. Facebook just came up. So sorry that one was just a couple minutes late. Glad you could make it." And Chris Walker says, "Good morning," coming in on Facebook. "Good morning, guys. Hate that I missed yesterday's surprise show." Yeah, that one needed to be done for the Falcons. This one we'll talk a little more more NFL teams. We'll talk all kinds of stuff going on, not just Falcons, but the Falcons are in the news right now on a national level. He said, I did watch a replay, though. I'm glad the Falcons made the moves they did. I'm very pleased at the moment. I think they made some solid moves. I agree with you. Again, we can stick on the Falcons early and then we'll move on. We talk about the defense. They poured, Nick, all they had to begin with for Terry Fontenot as a general manager's last 2 years was, how do we get under the salary cap and our draft picks? This year, it looks like with the draft picks, they went heavy offense. And this year, with the free agent money, it looks like they're going heavy defense.
And I think you'll see some heavier defense also on the NFL draft side this cycle, just where they're picking. I did see a little bit, and Scott, you'll probably be way against this, and I'd be against this too, but some posturing Falcons, because I've been covering this team now for 2 years now, doing these shows with you. So I followed some Falcons fans, and I get Falcons stuff brought to me by the master algorithm, and some conversation about maybe Bijan Robinson at 8 overall. That would be pretty wild. I mean, Arthur Smith, man, what he's doing with that offense, and you want to make the job easy, Bijan would be pretty crazy, but running back top 10, I can't get for it. So edge rusher, cornerback, probably the way to go.
It looks like it's still muted. Okay. Bijan at 8, I don't see it.
Trade down to 15?
It makes sense. I mean, you're like, okay, well, who's going to run the ball more than anybody? And is this the best player in the draft? Maybe it makes logical sense, except for the fact that it's not a running back dependent team. You got a 5th round rookie, went for 1,200 yards. You've turned Cordell Patterson into a star. Caleb Huntley was running great before he got hurt. We're talking NFL journeyman, 5th round pick, practice squad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, think of what you could do with a top 10 guy. Okay, well, how much better can you get with a top 10 guy? There's ceilings to this thing.
Yeah.
I don't see it. I don't see it with the draft with Bijan Robinson. Now that McGarry is sorted, you could go strength into a superpower and go with someone who can play left guard as well, like Skronsky at 8.
All of them. I mean, honest to God, all of them could play guard. Like Broderick, Skronsky, Paris Johnson played guard 2 years ago. Darnell Wright played guard. He's been rocketing up draft boards here as of late. So, but yeah, Skronsky makes the most sense as a long-term guard.
Right. And I guess I forgot who was, there was somebody that was all over him. There were really, I read it says, pay attention because one of the teams sent, 8 guys to his pro day or something yesterday. So, someone to watch. But again, I don't want, and I said this before the McGarry deal came out, I don't want the Falcons to really need to get a right tackle, because there's no way a rookie right tackle is playing better than McGarry did in this offense last year. That doesn't improve the team. What will improve the team is pass rush and pass defense, is getting someone that will make the team leaps better if you can get a consistent pass rush, or you can get a running mate for AJ Terrell. So let's move on in a little bit. Dave Glassman, a Broncos fan, coming. He says, I'm late, but you're here. Welcome in. Let me see here. Make sure we say hello to everybody. String Guy comes in. He says, good morning, guys. Good morning to you as well. Liquor with Lenore coming in. He says, good morning. Terry Fontenot is a guru. I've been pleased with Terry Fontenot. The only questions I've had, just because I didn't particularly like the first round picks the last 2 years. I didn't want Kyle Pitts. I didn't want Drake London. I wanted, and I'll go on record, I'll say I wanted trade down, Justin Fields, trade down, or Penny Sewell for that Kyle Pitts. Just more premium position. You don't have your quarterback. You need more players, et cetera, et cetera. And then last year, for the same reason, when you didn't have your quarterback sorted and your offensive line was a question mark, I didn't want another pass catcher in Drake London. I was for Kyle Hamilton because they needed a safety so badly. And instead they went and signed a $60 million guy at safety instead of Kyle Hamilton. But overall, I think the moves have been really good. I think they had the cojones to move on from Matt Ryan and eat that dead cap. That was the big one. And you don't do that without permission from your owner in order to do that. And, thank you to Arthur Blank. Falcons fans should be thanking Arthur Blank for letting Terry Fontenot do his job to dig the Falcons out from the hole that Thomas Dimitroff and Arthur Blank had put them in.
Yeah. And Liquor with Lenore says good corning. So maybe you're already on the liquor with Lenore this morning. But Mark Schrader, good morning. Good to see you, Mark, out there in Katy, Texas, I want to say. Good. Always really appreciate Mark coming in. One of the good guys out there. So appreciate you,
welcome
Mark.
in, Mark. Appreciate you coming here. And Chris said I'd still like to get former Titans center Ben Jones, also former Georgia Bulldog, former Alabama high school great Ben Jones. Ben Jones was he's been overlooked his entire career. He's one of those guys, the first thing that you call when you're scouting, you call it the look test. In baseball, it doesn't really matter as much, but you can still see these guys. I mean, when Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton walk up, you notice them. But, then you got Jose Altuve. Ben Jones will walk up a little pigeon-toed, knock-kneed, round, cheeky, just this unathletic-looking guy, and people will be like, what? And he was doing this at camps when he was a junior in high school. And then he would come in, and no matter who you lined up against him, he would whip their asses. 4-year starter at the University of Georgia, goes to the combine. I was there at that combine. I went there that year. I've been to 2. I went to that one. Some of the guys I work with from different teams are like, that's the guy? I'm like, just wait. Just watch him play football. The guy is a freaking gladiator. Having him come back to the state of Georgia for a year, if he's healthy enough, and give competition with Drew Dahlman and Matt Hennessy possibly, I'd be real interested in that, Chris. Real interested in that.
The thing that's carrying a lot of weight in that is that if he's healthy. I believe he suffered 2 concussions in the same month. He was released from the Titans with an injury waiver. That's a huge question. We just don't know.
Especially, I didn't realize it was the concussions as well. That one would be almost like, dude, you've probably made $20+ million in your career. Go raise a family.
Yeah, there's a possibility that he will. I think he's 33.
Go raise a family and make it so, because again, he is a gladiator, and you just heard me do it. We put those guys up on a pedestal to their own detriment for their long-term health. So if it is concussions, I might advocate just go fishing.
I'm in.
Go
invite me.
Go fishing with your son and your daughter, or whoever you have out there for your family, or go make plenty of more Joneses. But yeah, Ben Jones, spectacular football player, and has been overlooked his whole career, going back from when he was a 16-year-old high school kid. Joe Cannon throwing some props at the Broncos, so we can pivot this way just a little bit. The Denver Broncos loaded up on the O-line too. Great pickups in McGlinchey and Powers. Before the McGlinchey news came up, we asked, and I asked you, I said, who would you rather have with the big 3 right tackles on the market, McGlinchey, Jawan Taylor, and Caleb McGarry? Who would you take and why? And I think you said McGarry, but I think your second pick was probably McGlinchey, and it had to do with cost, not necessarily the player.
Yeah, I was getting some feedback that the market for Jawan Taylor was going to be much more shocking than you thought originally. I originally thought out of McGarry, McGlinchey, and Taylor, that Taylor, the less heralded, the guy being let walk by a team that's bad also, but only 25, some left tackle ability. You can see it on the tape. The length and the athleticism is different than McGlinchey and McGarry. So he gets the biggest deal of all the tackles so far. We still have Orlando Brown out there. We'll see what he gets. Probably just some negotiation and holding out between the Bears and him right now. But I thought McGarry, just because of the scheme fit. I also thought that I thought he'd cost the least between him and McGlinchey. I was a little bit concerned with McGlinchey's contract, even before the Broncos signed it. A player who's been regressing a little bit, dealt with some injuries, and seemed like he was going to get a massive payday. He did get a pretty big payday, tied for the 13th highest paid right tackle. Not 20 a year, but 17.5 with, I believe, the second most guaranteed money of a offensive tackle contract ever. That might be third now after the Jawan Taylor deal. But McGlinchey scares me a bit, but Broncos paid, and even if he's average, they have some certainty at a position that's been a rotation for 7 straight seasons now. So hopefully he is the answer there. It's just one that I feel like they probably overpaid to get that guarantee by a good bit.
they talk about, the rotation at quarterback, the revolving doors at quarterback since Peyton went down. Well, it's been the same at right tackle. So going in there, and then Broncos fans have heard me say it ad nauseum, and there's more than just Broncos fans in here, is I watched the Broncos get bullied in the trenches for 2 years in a row, both sides of the ball. Part of that was their center and their guard play. And they went out and spent a bunch of money on a guy named Powers. What's interesting, though, and his run blocking grade from PFF, and you've probably watched him more closely than me. I mean, my immediate bias is, okay, an interior lineman from the Baltimore Ravens, the AFC North, he's got to be tough, right? But his run blocking grade isn't very good. Take those grades with a grain of salt. Like I've said, I watch the Falcons and the Broncos and the Colts a lot. Whoever does the Falcons grades, I think, does a really, really good job. I'll watch those and say, okay, these match what I'm seeing. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, this guy was terrible, and he gets, except maybe the center position. Matt Hennessy was like a top 5 center in 2021, and no, he wasn't. But I think the PFF grades for the Falcons are pretty spot on for the most part. But I see a lot of variance because there's different people doing different teams in different positions. But his run blocking grade was actually a little bit lower than I was expecting on PFF.
Yeah, no doubt. And I saw it on Sports Info Solutions, who's now starting to kind of get in the player grading area, had Ben Powers as the 4th highest rated run blocking guard. So really, eye of the beholder. It's hard to tell with that. What I can gather just from watching from him is that he's not making many, seek and destroy, heat-seeking missile second-level blocks. So those loud.
And I'm going to let your computer catch up on this real quick. Nick has a new computer coming in this week, probably next week. But what he's saying is, and because I've heard Nick say this before, is the Powers won't be moved. He might not be as mobile to get to the second level and go get those guys and those pancakes out on the edge, but he's not getting blown up right up the middle the way Dalton Reisner was in the middle of that defense, the way Lloyd Cushenberry was in the middle of that offense last year. And that is going to benefit the Broncos greatly. I don't care how good your quarterback is. If he's dealing with your nose guard in your lap right off the snap, you're in trouble.
Yeah, without a doubt. So hopefully that'll help the Broncos a lot. And according to James Palmer on Good Morning Football yesterday, the Broncos are still in on the interior offensive lineman market. So maybe they get another person who's an upgrade to Lloyd Cushenberry. Lord knows they could use that. You were really low on Dalton Reisner, have been. I think he's still going to get an okay contract out there, but he's still out there. Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, he'll do an okay one, but that when we're looking at like spot rack market values, and it had him at 11.
Yeah.
How about 4?
I think I said 7.
Yeah, 4 would be more than I would be willing to pay for him. And if he gets 7, I'll be a little surprised at this juncture. I think if he was going to get 7, he probably would have already gotten it.
We will see.
We'll see, though. It only takes one. It only takes one, and we're dealing with a $250 million salary cap in some cases.
Almost every single contract so far that I've seen, I've looked at it off the cuff, other than McGarry. But I've looked off it, and I'm like, that's probably an overpayment by 1.5 to 4 million. And if every single one is like that, well, that probably is an impact of the inflation of the salary cap. But
I'll come back to you, Jason. I want to say hey to our guy, Gary Palmer, first, who has come in with the super chat. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Appreciate you getting us started, breaking the ice on the super chat. Just a reminder, wherever you're watching this, you can contribute to the show, help keep the lights on, help keep my forehead nice and shiny. And we can do some different things with super chats on YouTube and stars on Facebook. Wherever you happen to be watching, you can do both of those, just like Gary did. So, Gary, thank you, sir. Good morning. Hope you are doing well. I want to come back to Jason here because you had just dug into this a little bit about some rumors. Man, I've been so eaten up with news and just writing up the stuff that's happening. I haven't really followed what else is happening, what could be coming. So this is a good question for you, and I heard you just touch on it a little bit. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Any juicy rumors being floated out there that could be big acquisitions for teams still looking to elevate their teams? Other than the Jets are still out there. That one feels like it's just a matter of when and not if, doesn't it, with Aaron Rodgers?
It does, but it felt like that for the Broncos last year. So who freaking knows? Try to predict Aaron Rodgers.
I never believed it last year.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
didn't. I'd never believed it last year. This year I do. This year I
yeah.
think it's happening. Last year people asked, where do you think he's going to play? Green Bay. I almost always bet on the home team in retaining a guy. It's just easier to do. There's more
Yeah.
resources to do it. The league set up where to keep your own guys. This year, I think he's gone. I think he's going to be a Jet.
Certainly possible. I don't know. He's like trying to predict what the Joker is going to do. Just chaos. Looking like the Joker a little bit sometimes too. But any juicy rumors? I keep hearing Orlando Brown Jr. and the Bears. That was announced at one point, and then somebody said they jumped the gun. So I think they're probably just working on some finer details of that contract. Cortland Sutton is being shopped heavily right now. I think the Broncos are holding out for a round 3 pick. I think a lot of teams are saying, if we're taking on the contract, we'd rather give you a round 4. I'd rather the Broncos just hold on to Cortland Sutton if that's the case, but maybe it's a heap of day 3 picks. I mean, that would help fill out the draft a little bit and you shed some contract, but I don't know. I think I'd probably rather just hold on to him for that kind of value. The team to watch out for with Cortland Sutton, I've heard, is the New England Patriots. They keep coming up in regards to Cortland Sutton. Other than that, I don't know. We'll see what happens here. I think that the trades up at the top seem to be pretty solidified. I guess the other juicy rumor is number 1 and number 2 in the draft seem to be CJ Stroud and then Bryce Young, but we'll see if that changes over the course of the next month.
We've talked about that a lot, that Bryce Young seems to be top 2. The other one has been in flux a lot.
Yes.
Like it's Bryce Young and who? Not saying Bryce Young's going number 1, but he won't fall past 2. They're they're floating rumors about Anthony Richardson out there. So, and this kind of we'll pivot real quick to NFL draft and the Colts. The Colts have been exceedingly quiet going into the first day. They signed Samson Ebukam. I think that's how I've got his name without looking at it. That to me feels like a Yannick Ngakoue replacement. So Ngakoue will probably be on the move. They released Matt Ryan to clear up a ton of space. With $17 million. They've still got a bunch of space. They've got that number 4 pick. Would they settle for Will Levis? Because I just feel like someone wants to come up, would jump them for a number 3, Arizona, and Anthony Richardson's going to have such a hype train that he might go 3rd, if not higher. That 1, 2, 3 would be Stroud, Young, Richardson. Or all the salary cap space, it's so quiet. Good first-round picks. Lamar Jackson, Colts, could it happen?
Maybe. I mean, gosh, would the Baltimore fan base even hate the Indianapolis franchise even more for that, right? Leaving it the midnight out of Baltimore.
That franchise has nowhere to talk. I'm from Cleveland.
Yeah, that's fair. But that's true.
I'm from Atlanta. I was born in Cleveland. Akron, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. Moved down to Georgia when I was 5. I'm a Southerner for sure, but I got a lot of family up there, and they're all older than me, which means they're really old. They don't like the Ravens. I'll tell you, and you know why.
Yeah, but definitely a possibility. I saw also the Colts, other big news here. They releasing Matt Ryan, which Venn diagram there overlaps 2 teams that we talk frequently about or cover. So interesting to see what happens there with the Colts. Other big news, I guess I'm looking at their list right now. The other big signing here, kicker Matt Gay, 4 years, $22.5 million. Big money on a kicker. But other than that, the Colts have been exceedingly quiet. It's weird. They hired Shane Steichen, who is an offensive coordinator, first-time head coach, Eagles now, are from the Eagles, and think they might be a little bit, go get it. They have the cap space. They have some flexibility, especially how disappointing they were last season. You could play the slow game with Steichen being the first-year head coach, but Chris Ballard's got to be on the hot seat right now with how that team's disappointed the last couple seasons. I don't know. It seemed...
You're right, and that was one of the guys that there's a story up on Horseshoe Huddle, si.com/NFL/Colts Horseshoe Huddle, about Anthony Richardson gaining steam, and the person who at least put his name to it on Twitter with a blue check mark, I don't remember his name, was basically saying the big question here is what you just said: is Ballard will Irsay have the patience with Ballard to get the most out of Anthony Richardson, which could take 2 or 3 years?
Yeah. Hard to say, man. Talk about getting in the head of Aaron Rodgers earlier. It's even a darker, scarier place maybe in the head of Jim Irsay. So I don't I don't know.
Or
That's
it could be all happy rainbows and sunshine in that head too,
yeah, the
depending
monkey in
on
the vest with the
depending on
symbols. Like
what's
Lord
going
knows.
on.
Yeah,
Whee!
yeah. Uh, interesting dude for sure. But yeah, who knows? The Colts have been unfortunately a pretty quiet team. I enjoyed the Colts a lot growing up. Was always a big Peyton Manning guy, even when he was beating the Broncos' butts. My next door neighbor's daughter married Bob Sanders, so I got to meet Bob Sanders a good bit. Also an Iowa guy, and also got to meet and hang out with Dallas Clark a little bit when I was young. So I had a very soft spot for the Colts as well. So hopefully they can turn it around.
So Charlie, anybody pursuing Lamar, and Jeremy says nobody wants to deal with his agent. His agent is Lamar. And there was a little bit going on yesterday. There was some talk about him and what he turned down. And basically Lamar said that he was offered 133 guaranteed. So it was basically a 3-year, 40 per deal, all fully guaranteed contract, which on the average per is still good, is solid. Again, you knock that up to 5 and you're talking 5 years fully guaranteed at 200 and change, 205, 206, which would probably be it. So he's probably looking for a couple more years.
Yes, exactly.
Is what he's looking for, And again, it's not necessarily about the money itself, because it's about what the money represents. It represents this guy is getting this much. I'm as good as him. You don't respect me. Because when you're dealing with $100 million versus $200 million, it's more money than they'll ever need. It's hard. It's hard for us plebes to really understand that. It's not about that. It's not. It's about the respect that they feel and their egos and these type of things. And that's how they judge themselves. And they're all in this bubble, the NFL players bubble, where, dude, you got this contract, you got this. That's their measuring stick for how they are appreciated amongst their peers in the NFL. And it's important. It's important to them more so than what that money can actually do for them, because 1 year, $40 million is more than he'll ever need. It's not about what that money can do. It's about what that money represents. I hope that makes sense, because when you're dealing with this kind of money, it doesn't make sense to normal people. I mean, you're talking about $250 million. I may make a couple $1 million over the course of my life, maybe if I'm lucky. $250 million is well beyond that realm.
We'll see how inflation works out over the next decade, but you might be, closer to 10 when all those dollar value comes out. But we'll see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Lamar. That seems like on an average per year basis a good contract. It screams to me that he was looking for something 5-6 years,
right?
And I'd be okay giving him 5-6 years. I don't know if I'd be okay giving him 5-6 years fully guaranteed. Like if I'd give him similar guarantees to what that first deal was over 5 years, maybe 10 extra per year on those last 2 seasons, sure. But it doesn't sound like he wants that.
To me, it's the guaranteed money that matters. If you were to say, here's a 9-year contract with 225 fully guaranteed, where you get all of that in the first 5 and the last 4 are basically void years. Okay. So I think that would still be okay. But again, he's on the franchise tag right now.
Mm-hmm.
In order to come, if you wanted to go for a deal for him, maybe the Colts would. It would cost them 2 first-round picks to get Lamar Jackson to play under Shane Steichen. Yeah. Yeah, they would do that in a heartbeat if they thought they could. And we'll see.
And if also just real quick on that type of talk, the Colts potentially trading for Lamar Jackson, and get the bleep out of the 4 spot, right? Like that has to precede that, get down to like pick 20, get a bunch more picks. And then like, oh, here you go, Lamar, shiny, handy dandy little tender. Take that to the Ravens, because the 4th pick, you could get 3 firsts for it. You could turn that into the equivalent of that. Don't do it with the 4th overall pick. So I think you'd have to have a trade down preceding any sort of move like that. And I don't think there's any rule that they couldn't do that, right? It's just the first pick that you own that season. Well, why don't you navigate that into like the 15th through the 25th pick first?
Brilliant. I'm trading down to 25 and picking who's got 2 first-round picks, and I'll move down, or send me your 2 2s, or yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant is Mark Schrader coming in, bringing the stars on Facebook. Appreciate you coming in with 500 stars. Again, we had Gary coming in on YouTube and Mark coming in on Facebook with the stars, helping to support the show. We appreciate that. Brandon Swank comes in, and Mark cleared it up for us. It's Tyler, Texas. Tyler, not Katie. I've seen Katy High School play. I actually saw them play when they were in Jerry's World with the state championships. Was the same weekend I was there to watch Kyler Murray play his last game, which was pretty special. That was a lot of fun. Brandon Swank comes in. He says, talking about rumors here. He said, I heard the Cowboys could be interested in Atlanta tight end Kyle Pitts. Then again, it's just rumors. But what if we trade him for a Cowboys first draft pick? Who should we get with the 2 first picks? I'll tell you what. You're not getting Kyle Pitts for 1 first pick. You could talk about 2, and I'm answering the phone. If you were to say this year's, where are the Cowboys picking? 20? Somewhere in that neighborhood?
I believe so. I mean, they've lost.
You're not getting Kyle Pitts for 20 for me. No way, no how. 20 and next year's number 1, and I'll answer the phone. Then we're going to talk because it's going to cost you more than that. Jerry Jones was rumored to be infatuated. I think I've used that word a couple times already today with Kyle Pitts last year, or when he was coming out and being drafted.
Yeah.
And was he a guy that they could try and move up to get? And again, covering the Falcons, if the Falcons could have spun that number 4 into several more picks, it would have done them a lot of good. I would have been all for trading down. So calling back what I was making the point with Terry Fontenot. My big question with Fontenot was, what was he offered for that number 4? That's the big question I've always had, and I would love to find out. They'll never tell us publicly. Because the Falcons needed a lot of players, and it wasn't just Kyle Pitts that was going to make this team better. Now, he was 20 years old, and he could be a Falcon for life and could be very good in the long term. But no, you're not getting it. Kyle Pitts isn't going for 1 first-round pick. But if you had at number 8, now that right tackle is sorted for the Atlanta Falcons, I still think how they get better, who impacts their team the most, assuming that he is the one of the top players available, edge, cornerback, one of those two premium positions. And I think you'll have a choice with someone like Lucas Van Ness. Devin Witherspoon, corner, very physical corner, could be exactly what the Falcons need opposite A.J. Terrell. A.J. Terrell's a beast, actually, in run support. He is a hard-hitting guy that actually scares me sometimes. Like, you're gonna hurt yourself, dude. Back it down a little bit. He's extremely physical. And then Christian Gonzalez, Nick, for the corner from Oregon, could be a guy too.
And I saw that Miles Murphy is not testing at the Clemson Pro Day due to a hamstring issue. He might have his own personal pro day workout before the draft. I think they said April 4th. But that's concerning, right? Just like he keeps getting pushed down further. Didn't see him test at the combine, supposedly this athletic freak. Well, if you don't have the numbers to back it up, and he was kind of a little bit ho-hum as far as the production goes at Clemson, maybe you see him slip a bit. Maybe Lucas Van Ness does jump him. I had been saying Miles Murphy just because the more tape, but I mean, Lucas Van Ness is redshirt sophomore, younger, more raw to the game, probably potentially just as much, if not more upside, more versatility. So we'll see. Right now, I think the ideal pick for me, we talked about this yesterday morning on the emergency pod. I think the ideal pick for me for the Falcons right now is Christian Gonzalez, just because I'd have him ranked higher than Lucas Van Ness. Because Van Ness, I'm really honestly, I really love Van Ness. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. Where he won the most in college was a reduced 3 technique. Like in pass downs, get him over a guard, get him one-on-one, his length, his ability to play with leverage despite his height. He owned those guards in the Big Ten and a lot of the centers too. Not that classic edge rusher. So, I mean, granted, we saw what a lot of these guys that are inside-outside pass rushers get a lot of money. They're becoming really in vogue, especially for blitzing teams up front. But I think he's very, very good, and I love him. Don't get me wrong, but like I think that you have a higher floor and a more known quantity with Gonzalez for that pathway to the field.
The last time the Falcons were truly good across the line, this is a long time ago, was 1998 on their front, and they ran a front 4. And their front 4 had a combined like 40 tackles between them. So I don't remember if Patrick Kearney, but I think of Patrick Kearney on there, Lester Archambault. I'd have to look it up who those 4 guys were, but they ran a front 4. So if they want to go more 4-man front, Lucas Van Ness could be perfect as a defensive end.
And that Cam Jordan role also, who's an inside-outside kind of guy.
And Cam Jordan was a guy that was available when they traded to get Julio Jones. We'll talk about that later. Ryan Adonis comes in. He says, I think we're moving on from Pitts. I think he could go to the Raiders or someone who needs a tight end today. I don't think what you're saying is that that could happen today. I think he's just saying that someone that right now needs a tight end. I don't think it happens. I just don't. I don't think they're moving on from Kyle Pitts. That will absolutely shock me. And it would upset a lot of Falcons fans, frankly. There's so much good going on. He's 21. He'll turn 22, I think. Let's see. He turned 21 first year, turned 22. So he'll turn 23 this September. 23 years old. The reason why I didn't want to take him is because your quarterback position and your offensive line wasn't sorted. If you're moving on from Pitts, you're basically saying our long-term strategy was bunk. That Scott Kennedy guy was right all along. And this guy didn't help us a bit. I don't see that happening. I just don't, Nick.
It's not happening this offseason. Coming off that ACL injury, all the complications with that teams are going to lowball you because of that injury. The teams are not going to be as interested in giving up a lot of capital because of that injury, even though he'd have less year of control. Let's put a pin in that and talk about it maybe next year, depending on the direction of this Falcons team. Let's say it takes Kyle Pitts to get up to number 1 or number 2 after Desmond Ridder has a bad season, and you can go up and trade Kyle Pitts and then go get a quarterback. Let's say the Bengals flop next season because Burrow gets injured week 1 and they have the number 2 pick. Well, we're going to keep Burrow, but we're looking to move out of number 2. Well, here's Kyle Pitts plus, pick number 8 if the Falcons flub because of Desmond Ridder. Now you go up there and get your quarterback. That's when you maybe have a conversation like that, but it's not happening this year.
Yeah, Michael, I'll give this a shot and you can tell me how bad I am. Lutsky, is some of that in there silent? Unfortunately, you probably had that butchered by every first-year elementary school teacher you had when they were calling roll. But he says, hey, guys, is Matt Stafford available? There was a report he was coming to the Birds. I don't see that one happening either. I think Matt Stafford is one of the most underrated players in the history of this game. Being stuck in Detroit is not good for a quarterback's Q rating. Matt Stafford had one of the best arms I ever scouted, was one of those guys who could deliver accuracy and velocity from 90 to 180 degrees all the way down to throwing fast pitch softball. Just a special player, and I was happy for him to get his move out of there, but I don't see that happening either. I think you're pretty well set going into this draft and into this season where Desmond Ridder is going to get a shot and Taylor Heineke will be your backup. And if something were to happen, Heineke can step in and play in the system very well. And then you spend this season building up the roster. And then maybe next year, because I don't consider the Falcons to be Super Bowl contenders, but maybe next year, as you've spent 2 off seasons with some cash and another set of draft picks, that'll be your 3rd top 10 draft pick in a row. Then maybe you overpay to get your quarterback. Yeah. Then maybe you do it. Not now. This is why I've been against Lamar Jackson would be awesome for the Falcons. Yeah, he's a spectacular player. But you couldn't put the team around him to take advantage of Lamar Jackson. Spend this season doing that and then maybe overpay, but I don't see that one happening.
Matt Stafford's broken too, and his contract makes it hard.
He took a year in Detroit is like dog years. And I say that watching Matt Ryan succeed with the Atlanta Falcons for a long time, but that was the golden era for Falcons. People that complain about Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons did not live through the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. They just didn't. Yeah. The Matt Ryan era is the best era of football in the history of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, it's not all on Matt Ryan, don't get me wrong, but I promise you, the people who dislike Matt Ryan the most on the whole are under 35 years old. Yeah. Here, let me see here. I wanted to talk to, I think we just hit this one. Joe asks, is Isaiah Oliver, cornerback Isaiah Oliver, still on the Falcons roster? No, he is a free agent. And for those of you fans of other teams, if you were to sign Isaiah Oliver as a cornerback, be happy. He was playing really well in a nickel position in 2021, tore up his knee, missed the first part of 2022, came back, and by the end of the season was starting to play well again. 2023, he should be back to his 2021 form, which would be good. He's someone I would like the Falcons to get back.
And he was best in a nickel role. So we keep talking about, attacking, bringing somebody in the draft that's in a boundary cornerback opposite AJ Terrell. Well, this is a nickel league, and I know that the granted you brought in the defensive line coach from the Saints, not the secondary coach whose name's escaping me right now. But I know you guys interviewed him as well. But they'd like to use like a kind of a nickel safety slot, a guy who can come down. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a big fit there for a number of years before they traded him to the Eagles in that slot position. So we'll see what they do at the cornerback position. They spent huge money on Jesse Bates, probably one of the better signings, one of the better talents available in free agency this year. But yeah, they still have some work to do in the secondary and the defense as a whole if they want to get to a punching for a chance at the playoffs this season.
Did you hear McAfee? Akey comes in. Akey Dragon. Did you hear Pat McAfee on a show called Brett Favre the Sticky Finger Bandit? That could mean a whole lot of things, but no, I don't. I see some of his clips, but I don't typically watch those shows. Chris Walker coming in.
You know what Sticky Finger Bandit is a reference to?
I don't know what that is. It usually means a thief.
It is, but it's a Home Alone 2, where they are trying to the two crooks are trying to rebrand themselves as the Sticky Finger Bandit
instead of the Wet Bandits.
Yes, exactly. Okay. They did the Sticky Finger Bandits because he's like.
I didn't see Home Alone 2. I didn't watch that one. It was Home Alone was one of those that was so good. I'm like, I don't need to see it again. Don't screw this up for me. Pitt's got 1,000 yards receiving with a declining Matt Ryan. Marcus Mariota wasn't even close to Matt Ryan before last year. No, he wasn't. Matt Ryan was a much better passing quarterback. Our wide receiver core was bad after London. Yes, he was. Don't be down on Pitts because he didn't have a really good quarterback and not much help at wide receiver to take some pressure off him. Yeah. But Chris, here's 2 years right here in one little capsule of saying why it was stupid to take a pass catcher at number 4 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, he also maybe took didn't take the best one in hindsight. If you had to take a pass catcher, it's probably Jamar Chase. Even though I love Kyle Pitts, but it's probably Jamar Chase.
But maybe, what if you put Kyle Pitts and put him in a situation where he could thrive, where he could be a number 1 and your team wasn't garbage?
Yeah, based on what we know, you never, because you're changing variables, so it's impossible to say with 100% certainty. But
yeah,
if you were redoing
again, Jamar Chase, Drake London was really good last year. That was just, a little capsule of why it didn't make sense to take Kyle Pitts. You've burned through 2 years of his career, and you still don't know if you can take advantage of his skill set because you're not completely sure about quarterback. Need a lot more Saturday pro football. I'll disagree with that one. Saturdays
college
are for college, dude. Saturdays are for college. But he says any Buffalo Bills moves. They've re-signed a couple of their own players. Tyler Matakevich, linebacker. Yeah. Sam Martin, punter. Linebacker Matt Milano. And one of the big moves was a guard, Connor McGovern, and safety. They re-signed Cameron Lewis. So right now, that said, the big moves for the Buffalo Bills have been how much money they cleared up. They just cleared up like $40 million in cap space by restructuring Von Miller and Josh Allen yesterday. So they're doing something. Something's coming with the Buffalo Bills. Well, I might have to check in with my guys over on YouTube. Say, hey, what's going on? What are you hearing? Because they cleared up a ton of cap space. Something's coming down the pike with the Buffalo Bills.
Did they also restructure Stephon Diggs? Did they touch his deal as well? I thought maybe
the only two I saw were Vaughn and Josh. So maybe. I'm not saying no, but I didn't hear that one.
And it always makes sense. This is just, an accounting thing. Maybe nothing has come in for the Bills, but look, you're going to keep Von Miller for a lot of his contract. You're going to definitely keep Josh Allen for a lot of his contract. Restructuring that is just creating money now that if you don't use, guess what? You just roll it over into the year that you restructured it to, and it's a zero difference, right? It's just that because the rollover that you created gets pushed to that year where that's paying more. Well, guess what? Whatever we're paying him more was just pushed over that we created in this year. So it gives you flexibility in the immediacy that you don't have to use, but you can use. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe Orlando Brown Jr. I know they've been pretty happy with Deion Dawkins there at left tackle there for a number of years out of Temple, I believe.
Weren't they being linked to a bunch of running backs too?
They were being linked to a bunch of running backs. Maybe they'll pay solid for a running back. There's not really a guy that would be worth breaking the bank for. But there's some options out there.
Yeah, but you start thinking about the Bills. It's like, okay, what makes them better? And they're in a luxury position, kind of like the Eagles. It's like, I can overpay on a position of, not necessarily as good value because the rest of my roster is solid. So they can make some of those moves. The Eagles are in a position like that where they can go after luxury players early to try and put them over the top.
Let's play
Follow-up question:
matchmaker
does
real quick.
Matt Ryan get cut?
Yes, he did.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, matchmaker real quick. As somebody who seems pretty damn PO'd yesterday based on the moves that happened. Josh Jacobs, potential trade. Maybe he demands out, and then if they're linked to running backs, how about the number 1 running back in football last season? I don't know if
did they just tag him?
They tagged him, but I could see him being and not wanting anything to do with what's going on right now.
Yeah, I'll sit out the tag. Pollard got tagged, so that's the thing is the franchise tag makes a lot of sense for running backs because I can take a running back high. I don't want to use his 5th-year option because a 5th-year option for a running back taken, a player taken in the top 20 is higher than a franchise tag for a running back. So I can get, instead of a 5th-year option, I can draft him I can draft him in the first, get 4 years, and then use a franchise tag for my 5. And unfortunately, they're all beat up and banged up after 4 years anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jacobs could threaten to sit out if you wanted to and try and force a move. But yes, need a lot more Saturday Pro Football. Did Matt Ryan get cut? Yes, he did. That was inevitable. That one was done since basically Halloween. The Colts benched him, and one of the reasons why, though they wouldn't admit it, was he was going to be, if he made it past a certain day, if he got hurt, $30 million of his contract was going to guarantee. He wasn't good enough to keep around for the Colts to keep the type of money on the books that he was going to make. So they're going to eat about a $15 million dead cap hit, but they're going to get back about 17, which puts them in the, I was looking at this morning, I think they doubled what they had. They about 34 million, and they signed one player. So they're at about $30 million of available cap space right now before they do anything else with restructures or whatnot. So the Colts have some money to spend too, and a top 5 pick. So they're in pretty good shape. String Guy says, could Denver afford Isaiah Oliver in the slot? Going back to cornerback, former Falcons, not former, just free agent to be cornerback Isaiah Oliver.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility for the Broncos. They need cornerback depth in the worst way. I mean, after right now their top 2 guys in their top number 1 slot, I don't know who's the next guy up. So that's a position that the Broncos are probably going to target in the draft. But if they could sign somebody for cheap to fill the need for one season, it makes a lot of sense. Oliver played at University of Colorado, so definitely something to look out for. I think they'll still make a move for a defensive back.
Yeah, he would be $4 to $5 million, I think, on the high end is what he would be. And I think you can probably get him for less than that because of the injury. The Falcons got him for less than that, and he didn't come back and play at a significantly higher level. So $3 million or so, you could have him. So yeah, I think most teams could afford him. Again, half the teams in the league are still over the cap, and they figure out a way to do that so far. Michael says, what grade would you give the Atlanta Falcons so far? An A. I'd give them a solid A in free agency so far.
Yeah.
You've improved the quarterback room. I would argue that over last year, Taylor Heineke, I think, was a better quarterback than Marcus Mariota. I don't think that's a bold statement. But then you go right down the spine of your defense, right down the middle. Defensive tackle, Onyemata, solid player. Linebacker, Caden Ellis, high upside, really good pass rusher up the middle. You got 7 sacks, I think, and 11 starts. That would have led the Falcons with 7 sacks. Onyemata was a good passer. I think he had 6. The only person that had more, I think, or 5 or 6, but I think Grady had one more than him. You just picked up 12 sacks up the middle of your defense. And then Jesse Bates was one of the top available free agents, position players, non-quarterbacks, period. Boom. Right down the middle of your defense. And you still have a bunch of money in a top 10 pick, I think. And then you get Caleb McGarry on a what I would consider to be a reduced rate, a team-friendly deal. Extend Chris Lindstrom, bring back Keith Smith, the fullback, the dirt player that I absolutely love, and bring your punter back. I think it's been a fantastic week for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I need to do more research on Caden Ellis, linebacker. I know that he, crazy good pass rush numbers from the Saints from that off ball, the stack linebacker spot, whatever terminology you want to use
You
around
can
it.
just
Every
call them
single team.
middle linebackers. That's what they play.
Yeah,
They've been inside linebackers for 100 years. That hasn't
yeah.
changed.
It's the off ball inside stack linebacker, uh, twice removed. But yeah, the looking at came from Idaho, obviously 7th round pick for the Saints, and it's the pro day numbers, so it's not you can't always lean too hard into it because sometimes you get a little bit benefit, increase score by 10%. But his shuttle and his 3-cone were both in the like 90th percentile,
Those are
413.
my backers, man. Right there. Those are
Yep.
linebacker numbers right there.
413 shuttle, 6.63 3-cone. Good numbers. Granted, again, pro day numbers, so grain of salt, but those are agility numbers. Good job by the Saints scouting, finding a 7th round pick from Idaho that's contributed like that. So
6'3" L cone at 230 pounds. My goodness, those are cornerback numbers.
240 pounds.
Yeah, I was thinking he might have gotten a little bit heavier, so I was trying to give the benefit of the doubt. Let me look at if I sort corners. If I look at cornerbacks from the NFL Combine this year, and again, like you said, they were pro day numbers, so they're not quite self-reported. Elko numbers for cornerbacks: 6'3", Julius Brents, 709, 702. There's not a lot in here, so I need to make sure I've got more of them. 6'9", 688. So I need to make sure I've got all of them, but anything under 7's elite. So yeah, he's a high upside guy, and wasn't overly expensive. So let me see here. Raymond has a good question on here. I addressed this in comments. So if you're watching this now, and you're not live, leave a comment after the fact. There's a bunch of people watching this on YouTube right now. So hit that subscribe button, and I will answer your comments. If they're questions, if they're just like, I will answer your questions. Let me put it that way. But Raymond says, good morning, guys. Think we will re-sign Rashad Evans. That's the Atlanta Falcons linebacker, 1-year deal last year. And Raymond, in a discussion I had yesterday on my YouTube channel, I said, I don't think so. You might, but now you've got Troy Anderson, you've got Caden Ellis, and you've got Michael Walker, 1, 2, and 3. And I think someone, it might have been Samuel Davis, comes in and says, you probably want 4. And I said, yes, you do. And that one would probably be a rookie or, a minimum type guy, a young upside type guy. And Rashad Evans would be looking for more of an opportunity to play. So I don't think Rashad Evans would be back with the Atlanta Falcons now.
Probably not. If it is, it's something where you come back to him. He's still available for super cheap after the draft. And you're like, you know what? We want a little bit more depth here. Somebody who's some versatility, an athlete out there. Hey, look what your market is, Rashad. Like nobody's really valuing you right now. Maybe you should come back, come back home and
come back on $2 million.
Yeah. And special teams might be your home now. You might get some defense look, but you can make another 5 years, 6 years of money out there being a special teams guy. There's always a value for that third phase. So that's probably what I'm looking for with him at this point.
Yeah, if he were to come back, it would be like an August signing.
Yes.
You're not in any big rush, because I think, again, you would wait until you'd see what other things would do, because right now he would probably be 4. Maybe, but that's my thoughts right now, Raymond. Appreciate the questions. Jesse Fraley coming in with the corgi, coming in yellow, helping to close us out. We got a couple more minutes left in the show, so appreciate Jesse coming in, supporting the show with a super chat over on YouTube to help, like I said, help keep the lights on, help keep my forehead good and shiny. The space is for rent, by the way, for potential sponsors. Here's a question Brandon has. What if Derrick Henry joins his old coach? I thought I could finish that without having to do that. What if Derrick Henry joins his old coach, Arthur Smith, with the Atlanta Falcons? What would a trade look like? How much do you think that would cost?
I can't imagine it's going to cost more than a 3rd round pick. Honestly, with this you're taking on $10 million for a running back who's started dealing with injuries last season. I mean, no, Derrick Henry's great, but he's still a running back. I mean, those things tend to fall off rather quickly. So 3rd round pick makes sense to me. If they want more, then good luck. We'll find a running back who's going to be cheaper for probably effective for more years. 3rd round that I'd be happy with as well, if you're willing to spend a 3rd round pick. So probably a 3rd round pick if Titans want it. I mean, heck, given how early the Falcons picked too, maybe I want like a 6th round pick back this season as well. So I don't know. Not to disrespect Derrick Henry. It's just, where he's at in his career.
It's
right
late
now.
in his career, the injuries, the tread on the tires. I got a $1,800 set of tires, but they're not worth. They're gonna have to replace them when they start getting low. So it can be like that for sure. And plus when you've got a team that wants to get out from the salary cap, wants to try and create a cap room, then they are trying to get whatever they can. You take his contract. We saw the Falcons pull that off with Jonnu Smith. Send him a 7th rounder. We'll take on his contract. Now, Derrick Henry and Jonnu Smith, I know. Scott, are you kidding me? You're comparing those two? Okay. How about a 5th rounder for Stephon Gilmore? Stephon Gilmore is still one of the top corners in the NFL. He's late in his career. 5th rounder. We'll just take his contract. That's what the Cowboys did with the Colts. Couple of good questions coming in here at the end. Michael says, where would you go at 8 with the Atlanta Falcons after these moves? For me, I'm still edge and corner. Those are the top 2 priorities for me. And there should be a player available. The best player available thing always rankles me. Well, they took best player available. Did they really, though? Because there's 20 guys later in the draft that end up with better careers. I just hate that phrase. The top player on your board would be a better way to put that. We took the top player on our board. One of those guys in that tier of top players on the board should be an edge or a cornerback for the Atlanta Falcons at 8. That's where I would go, Nick.
I still am going to advocate that if the top player on your board at that point is an offensive lineman, you shouldn't overthink it. Let's say you didn't have.
How close is it though?
Let's say you have Witherspoon as a tier down from Christian Gonzalez and Lucas Van Ness, and both of those 2 are gone. And your best player on your board that you see as a future All-Pro and a 15-year starter is an offensive lineman there. And Devin Witherspoon, you have questions about the scheme fit or the size or the didn't test, right? Don't have the actually athletic numbers. Going for the offensive line, I mean, it's a long-term. Drafting is not about 2023. It's about the next 5 to 10 years.
10 years. No, I agree. It's just in my mind, those guys are close. So there should be, and that's why I always say that there should be a player at edge or corner available that fits in that tier of top player on your board. You could have them ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but if you've got grades next to them and it's 92, 92, 92, 92, then they're all the same. Then they're right there. Now I'm going edge or corner. Unless, Nick, Jalen Carter's sitting there.
Yeah.
Jalen Carter's sitting there, and you just spent a bunch of money on David Onyemata. You've got Grady Jarrett, but I've got Jalen Carter, possibly. I'm real interested. Anthony Richardson falls to 8. I'm real interested. Having Anthony Richardson, I don't think it'll happen now, but having Anthony Richardson on the team when you don't need him to play right away, when you don't need a quarterback to play right away, becomes really interesting, Michael. Really interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Again, I'm not advocating for offensive line there for them, but I mean, we're seeing what some of these offensive linemen are getting paid, not named Caleb McGarry, and you are in a position where you can turn probably the strongest thing in your team into a superpower. And we saw what it did last season for the Detroit Lions, where they could pretty much just do whatever they wanted to with the play action game. One of the few teams that was seeing pretty consistent cover 1, cover 3 looks because of how strong their offensive line was. So again, I would say I agree with you 100%, but I do think that offensive line needs to be included if it's a guy, if you rank a guy significantly higher than other folks on the board.
Yeah, I wouldn't pass on them for sure, especially when those guys have the ability to play guard.
Yes.
The Falcons don't have an answer at left guard yet. They got good production from Eli Wilkinson and maybe Chuma Edoga. I think Ryan and I had that discussion yesterday. Why not both? Why not both? If you've got the opportunity. But
and there's talk about Skoronski potentially playing center. I know that you were okay with your center there, but now you have multiple avenues to get a plus player on that unit. And then the other ones that we're talking about, if they can play guard for 2 seasons and then you free up the cash and move on from Jake Matthews. I mean, it's about, putting an investment in that unit that's going to be the identity of your team for the next 5 years. And with Arthur Smith, it probably should be and will be.
That said,
offensive or
corner and edge.
Corner, yes. I agree. Yeah.
Edge number 1 for me, as far as need goes. corner number 2 as far as need goes to make this team better for 2023. That's how I see it. For how do I get better right away? Don't reach. That's the whole point. In a 2-second soundbite, what Nick is trying to say, don't reach to fill a need. The best draft is when you've got the best player, the top players on your board, fit a need. That's the best draft. DWI guys is always filling our needs, taking care of us. I know I heard it when I said it. Taking care of us, keeping the lights on. Appreciate you, Ethan, over in London. I bet Ethan's going to try and sneak in some Champions League today. I know I will too. He says, great show, gents. Thank you, sir. Coming in orange with the super chat. And Michael says, great show today, Scott and Nick on Coast to Coast Football. Thank you so much. And then one last thing, and then we're going to dip on out of here, I think. He says, if that's the case with Detroit, sounds like a good spot for MR2. So what was the case with Detroit?
Just talking about how their offensive line is a superpower, that they can run play action and everybody bites, and they're playing cover 1, cover 3 pretty consistently. I don't know who MR2 is.
I do. That's a good shout from Chris Walker, because Matt Ryan backing up Jared Goff makes a lot of sense. It really does. If you've got a heavy play action, good run game, and the Detroit Lions do, Matt Ryan can still run an offense and put the ball where it needs to be, running that type of. He had his career high rushing last year with a 38-yard scramble. Matt Ryan's not washed. I don't believe that. He still wants to play. He'll have a job as soon as he wants one at CBS if he wants to go into broadcasting after. But I've got a clip on my site where just you can look up Matt Ryan retirement. He doesn't want to play. I mean, he doesn't want to retire just yet. Detroit over there, as for some insurance for Jared Goff, makes a lot of sense, Chris. That's a good shout.
Yeah. And Murgod asking, do you guys think Falcons could get some available free agents at edge, and who is still available? Well, wouldn't you believe that I just closed my tab of who's still available, but I could see them looking to bring in somebody right now at edge just to solidify the room a little further. But your best avenue to adding a plus player on that unit right now is that 8th overall pick or your 2nd round pick. This is a pretty darn good edge group. I think you're going to have a chance at some good edge rushers day 2 for where the Falcons are picking.
Draymond Jones.
He's gone.
He signed. That's right. Zach Allen is signed. Ebukam, Ellis, Arden Key, DeMarcus Walker. Those guys have all signed. Davenport was one of our guys. Available players. Those are all guys that have signed. Leonard Floyd still makes sense. Former Georgia Bulldog. I don't want Jadeveon Clowney. If I need a designated pass rusher, Colts Yannick Ngakoue could make a little bit of sense.
Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston.
Melvin Ingram is old but still fairly productive. Same with Justin Houston, who's from Statesboro.
Frank Clark.
I don't want Dante Fowler back. Lorenzo Carter's better than that. I don't want Malik Reed. So what did Brandon Graham end up doing?
He stayed back into Philly.
Okay, which makes sense.
Frank Clark is also out there.
If I need an alpha edge rusher, it's gonna have to come from the draft. So how quick do those guys go? Is there any way Tyree Wilson falls to 8? No. Will Anderson, probably not. We're talking about him going top 5 for sure. Again, you might need to be just one spot ahead. If 4 quarterbacks go at the top 7, that's possible. Tyree Wilson, Carter, and Will Anderson, there's 7. Now you're sitting at 8.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
You never know, right? We have all these things where we keep being told how the draft's going to fall, and then it doesn't work out that way. So Lord only knows.
Maybe you move up a spot. Maybe you move up a spot.
Maybe you trade down. It's a completely different conversation.
Appreciate you coming up in here. Anderson seems too small to me. It'd be situational for sure. I think, but that's one of the reasons I do like the idea of 280 pounds of Lucas Van Ness, also 270 of him as well. And some news here: New England Patriots are signing tackle Riley Rafe.
Go Hawks!
So, on that note, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody being here. I think String Guy may have asked, when are you guys going to do your next mock draft next Wednesday? We'll do one Wednesday morning. We'll do a full show after a lot of the dust is settled on free agency, and we can answer some of those questions. How does this affect the draft? And we'll see what shakes out in the next week. So we'll do a full mock draft, first round mock draft next Wednesday. We may do team specific ones next week as well. So, on our Falcon show, on our Broncos show, et cetera, et cetera. So appreciate the question, String Guy. Thank you to everybody that has come in to help support the show. We've got a lot of people watching. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you get the notifications to come in later. Jesse Fraley, Gary Palmer, Ethan coming in, stars with Mark Schrader. I'm forgetting somebody that came in with some stars also with a super chat, but those were the big ones for us. Like I said, help keep the lights on, help support the show, helps make sure that we're going to keep doing what we're doing because we love doing it. And thank you for being here. Any questions, hit the follow up. Nick, any last words before I hit this end broadcast button?
No, a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. Always appreciate the free reigns that is the Wednesday shows. Excited to be have another week to marinate on all the signings, see how all the dust settles, a week from now, and then really get into the home stretch of covering the NFL draft. Hopefully, we'll start getting a little bit beyond the round one. Start really getting into some of the positional tier rankings as well. And with the Falcons, like Broncos don't pick until 67, 68, but with the Falcons, we're talking offensive line, cornerback. Defensive line, the only position that we're not talking about right now, and we would be, I think, if there's a player worth it, wide receiver. Positions of value. I mean, it's great. That's what I'm all about for those team building if you're drafting in the top 10. So it'll be exciting to talk about them. And thank you guys for being a surrogate team for me to follow, given my lack of draft capital for the Broncos these last couple of years.
Well, we enjoy the process. That's why we're doing this show on Coast to Coast Football. So appreciate everybody for being here. We will see you next Monday at 9 a.m. or you can catch us tomorrow on Mile High Huddle at 9:30. Thanks for being here, everybody. Had a great time. It's been a good week. Looking forward to next week as well, and have a great weekend.